Today we're going to talk about how to analyze quadratic equations to determine appropriate methods for solving that equation. There are 4 methods that you've learned so far, and we need to decide which of those will work best when actually trying to solve. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the discriminant that we just talked about, and we're going to actually use it in a little bit different manner. So just to review, the discriminant is the b squared minus 4ac. We're going to, instead of looking to see if it's 2 real solutions, 1 real solution, or no real solution, we're going to go ahead and look at the type of number to decide if I can factor or not. So there's a series of questions you need to kind of ask yourself. The very first thing that you need to do is ask yourself, does the equation have an x squared but not an x? So if I had 3x squared equals 5, I'm missing that x piece. So if your answer is yes there, we're going to go ahead and take square roots. Okay, fastest, easiest way to do it. Isolate the part that's being squared, take the square root of both sides, and go from there. If that answer is no, you're going to go ahead and calculate the discriminant. So that's where you're going to use the b squared minus 4ac. And if you can actually plug that into your calculator and take the square root to get a whole number, not a decimal, okay, answer is yes, then we're going to go ahead and factor that one. Okay. If it's not, then you're going to go ahead and use the quadratic formula. Okay, so first, if there's an x squared but not an x, we're going to square root. If the discriminant is a perfect square, we're going to solve by factoring. If it's not, you could use the quadratic formula, and that always works. And then completing the square, I would only use when there's not a leading coefficient. So if there's not a number out front, and you can actually divide b by 2. Now, typically what I tell students is, because complete the square is a little bit different process, try to do the first 3 options first. I don't actually choose to use complete the square, really ever. I try to use the other 3. Okay, so determine which method you could use to solve each quadratic equation. We have 2 equations here. So for the first one, the first question I'm going to ask myself is, do I have an x squared but not an x? If my answer is yes, I'm going to solve by square roots. Since my answer is no, I need to use the discriminant. So we're going to go ahead and do b squared minus 4ac. So we're going to plug this in. We have negative 8 squared minus 4 times 5 times negative 4. And I'm going to plug that into my calculator to see what my discriminant is. And I get 144 for an answer. Now, if I can take the square root of 144 and get a whole number rather than a decimal, that means I can factor. So I'm going to go ahead and do the square root of 144. So I'm going to check this now. And I get 12. Okay, not a decimal, it's a whole number. So that means I'm going to go ahead and factor this one. Okay. For the second one on this page, I'm going to look at my variable. Notice I have an m squared there, but not an m. So actually, since there's an m squared and not an m, my answer for that first question is yes. Okay, I have an m squared, but not an m, so I'm going to use square roots. Apologize, there's a little lag time there. So since I know right away I can use square roots, I don't actually have to use the discriminant. Like I said, you could always use quadratic formula, but it might not be the easiest way to do this. Let me go ahead and erase that since it didn't really show up very well. So that does say square roots there. Okay, so that would be my method I'm going to use. Okay, next one. I have an x squared, but I also have an x, so I can't do square roots. I'm going to go ahead and find my discriminant. So b squared minus 4ac. I'm going to plug in my variables there, or my numbers for my coefficients. So I have 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 63. I'm going to type that in my calculator, see what I get. I actually get 256. I'm going to go ahead and check to see if I can take the square root of that. So the square root of 256 gives me 16. Okay, since this is a whole number, not a decimal, that means I'm going to factor this. I want you to look at the original equation as well. We know that we could possibly complete the square. I only like to do that when there's nothing out front here, so I don't have to worry about that. And when I can easily divide that b term, this middle number, by 2. So this one would be an okay one to go ahead and complete the square as well. Like I said, I don't typically choose to complete the square. I usually try to factor instead, but this is a case where you could actually complete the square instead. Okay, let's do the next one. Again, if you ask yourself that same question, is there an x squared but not an x? My answer is no, so I'm going to skip question 1. I'm going to go ahead and find my discriminant. So we're going to have b squared minus 4ac. So I'm going to plug those in. I have negative 9 squared minus 4 times 5 times 3. And when I plug that into my calculator, I'm going to get 21 for an answer. So if I try to take the square root of 21, I get a decimal, which is about 4.6. So since I get a decimal here, I'm going to use the quadratic formula. Okay. Go ahead and try these 2 problems. Have them checked before you go ahead and try the homework. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, but definitely make sure you practice this one. There's actually 4 guided practice problems there. Have a great day.